When my husband threw my wedding ring at my face and told me I was worthless trash who would never amount to anything, he had no idea he was speaking to the founder and CEO of Meridian Technologies, a company worth $2 billion. For 10 years, I had lived as Isabella Chen, the quiet accountant who struggled to pay bills and endured his verbal abuse in silence. Tonight, as I watched him pack his bags to move in with his secretary, I smiled because he had forgotten one crucial detail about the prenuptial agreement he had forced me to sign. The same document that protected his assets from me also contained a clause that would destroy his life the moment he filed for divorce. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sound of Marcus throwing clothes into his suitcase echoed through our modest two-bedroom apartment in downtown Seattle. Each item he tossed seemed to carry the weight of 10 years of marriage, 10 years of carefully constructed lies, and 10 years of enduring treatment that would have broken anyone else. But Marcus Chen had never been married to anyone else. He had been married to me, Isabella Rodriguez Chen, though he knew me only by the identity I had carefully crafted to protect both of us from a truth he could never have handled. "You know what your problem is, Isabella?" Marcus said, not bothering to look at me as he folded his expensive suits with the same dismissive efficiency he used for everything in our relationship. "You have no ambition, no drive. You are content being mediocre, and I refuse to be dragged down by your limitations any longer." I sat quietly on the edge of our shared bed, watching this man who had shared my life for a decade reveal the depths of his misconceptions about who I was and what I had sacrificed to maintain our marriage. Marcus worked as a mid-level marketing manager at a technology consulting firm, earning $75,000 annually and considering himself successful within his limited sphere of influence. He had no idea that the woman he was berating had built a technology empire that employed over 15,000 people across 12 countries. Marcus had no understanding that the same woman he dismissed as lacking ambition had revolutionized cybersecurity protocols for Fortune 500 companies and held patents on innovations that had transformed entire industries. He was unaware that Isabella the quiet accountant was actually Isabella, the visionary entrepreneur whose algorithms protected the digital infrastructure of major governments and corporations worldwide. Most importantly, Marcus remained completely ignorant of the fact that his comfortable lifestyle, his luxury car, his expensive clothing, and his ability to treat our marriage as disposable had all been subsidized by the very woman he was now abandoning for someone he considered more worthy of his attention. "Jennifer understands success," Marcus continued, referring to his 26-year-old secretary with the casual cruelty that had characterized our relationship for far too long. "She appreciates achievement and wants to build something meaningful with her life. Unlike you, she has goals that extend beyond processing other people's financial records." The irony was so profound that I almost laughed. Jennifer Morrison, the secretary who had captured Marcus's heart and convinced him to leave his marriage, worked for a company whose primary client was Meridian Technologies. Her salary, like his, was indirectly funded by contracts I had personally negotiated and supervised. The life he planned to build with her would be financed by the success of the woman he was discarding as worthless. Marcus had fallen in love with Jennifer because she represented everything he believed he deserved: youth, beauty, ambition, and most importantly, admiration for his perceived accomplishments. Jennifer looked at Marcus and saw a successful professional who could provide her with security and advancement opportunities. She had no way of knowing that his success was entirely dependent upon his connection to me, or that his departure would immediately terminate the advantages she found so attractive. The prenuptial agreement that Marcus had insisted upon before our marriage was designed to protect his assets from what he assumed would be my inevitable attempt to claim half of his wealth through divorce proceedings. He had hired an expensive attorney to draft documents that would ensure I received nothing beyond basic spousal support in the event our marriage ended. The attorney had been thorough in protecting Marcus's interests while remaining completely unaware of the assets and income I had chosen not to disclose during our engagement. What Marcus and his attorney had failed to consider was the possibility that his wife, might possess wealth that exceeded his own by several orders of magnitude. The prenuptial agreement contained standard language about full financial disclosure, with severe penalties for any party who had concealed assets or income during the marriage. Marcus had signed those documents confident that I had nothing to hide and everything to lose if our relationship failed. He was correct about my having everything to lose, though completely wrong about why I had hidden my true identity and circumstances from him. The decision to live as Isabella Chen rather than Isabella Rodriguez, technology entrepreneur and billionaire, had been motivated by love rather than deception. When I met Marcus 12 years ago at a coffee shop near the University of Washington, I was 28 years old and had recently sold my first company for $200 million. I was in the process of launching Meridian Technologies and had already secured the funding and partnerships that would eventually make me one of the youngest female billionaires in the technology sector. Marcus was completing his MBA and working part-time as a research assistant while dreaming of a career in corporate marketing. He was intelligent, charming, and refreshingly uninterested in my wealth or professional achievements, because he knew nothing about them. For the first time in years, I was able to interact with someone who valued me for my personality, my sense of humor, and my character rather than my net worth or business connections. The technology industry had taught me that genuine personal relationships were nearly impossible when people knew about my financial resources. Every conversation became an opportunity for someone to propose a business venture, request funding, or position themselves for personal advantage. Dating was particularly challenging because I could never determine whether romantic interest was authentic or motivated by the lifestyle my wealth could provide. Marcus represented an escape from that isolated existence. He liked Isabella, the graduate student who was completing an accounting degree while working part-time at a bookstore. He enjoyed spending time with someone who shared his modest budget for entertainment and understood the challenges of building a career from entry-level positions. Our relationship felt authentic because it was based on compatibility and genuine affection rather than financial considerations. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When Marcus proposed marriage after 2 years of dating, I faced a decision that would define the next decade of my life. I could reveal my true identity and test whether his feelings for me would survive the dramatic shift in our relationship dynamics, or I could continue living as Isabella Chen and build a marriage based on the person I had become when I was with him, rather than the entrepreneur I was in my professional life. I chose love over honesty, though I convinced myself that the deception was temporary and protective rather than fundamentally dishonest. Meridian Technologies was structured through a complex network of holding companies and trusts that allowed me to receive income and exercise control while maintaining privacy about my ownership and involvement. My official role as Chief Technology Officer provided legitimate explanation for my flexible schedule and occasional travel, while the bulk of my responsibilities were handled through encrypted communications and virtual meetings that Marcus assumed were routine remote work arrangements. The modest apartment we shared was purchased through one of my holding companies and leased to us at below-market rates. Marcus believed we were fortunate to find affordable housing in a competitive market, unaware that I owned the entire building along with several others in the same neighborhood. His luxury car was a lease arranged through corporate accounts that provided him with transportation he could never have afforded on his actual salary. His expensive clothing and electronics were gifts I justified as wise investments in his professional development. Our lifestyle appeared to stretch Marcus's income to its limits while actually representing a tiny fraction of my monthly earnings. The illusion required constant management and careful attention to details that prevented Marcus from recognizing the discrepancies between our apparent financial situation and our actual standard of living. The emotional cost of maintaining this elaborate deception had been enormous, though I convinced myself that the sacrifice was worthwhile as long as our marriage remained strong, and Marcus continued to love the person I was when we were together. I told myself that someday I would reveal the truth, and we would laugh about the complexity of the arrangements I had created to protect our relationship from the complications that wealth typically introduces. That someday had never arrived, and tonight I finally understood that it never would have arrived because Marcus had never actually loved me at all. The man packing his belongings with such casual dismissal had fallen in love with an illusion of helplessness and dependence that allowed him to feel superior and necessary. He had married Isabella Chen, the struggling accountant who needed his protection and guidance, because that version of me made him feel powerful and successful. The real Isabella Rodriguez, technology innovator and business leader, would have threatened his sense of masculine authority and professional achievement. Marcus had chosen to end our marriage, not because I lacked ambition or capability, but because 10 years of supporting his ego had finally exhausted my willingness to diminish myself for his comfort. He was leaving because Jennifer represented a fresh opportunity to play the role of mentor and provider that I had stopped appreciating with sufficient enthusiasm. What Marcus did not understand was that his departure would force me to stop protecting him from consequences that I had been carefully managing throughout our entire relationship. The prenuptial agreement that he believed would limit my claims against his assets would actually expose him to liability for the wealth he had unknowingly enjoyed during our marriage. The lifestyle he assumed he had provided through his own efforts would disappear along with the financial arrangements I had created to support his illusions about our circumstances. Most importantly, Marcus would discover that the woman he was abandoning possessed the resources and connections to ensure that his decision to prioritize his secretary over his marriage would have professional and personal consequences that extended far beyond the end of our relationship. "I will be staying at Jennifer's apartment until I can find something more permanent," Marcus announced, zipping his largest suitcase and setting it beside our bedroom door. "My attorney will contact you about the divorce proceedings next week. I suggest you find legal representation, though given your limited resources you should probably accept whatever settlement offer we propose." I remained silent, processing his assumption that I would be the vulnerable party in divorce negotiations, and his confidence that I lacked the resources to mount effective legal opposition to his plans. Marcus had no concept of the legal team I maintained through Meridian Technologies, or the attorneys who specialized in protecting my interests across multiple jurisdictions and business arrangements. Marcus had never asked detailed questions about my background, my family, or my life before we met, because he had been satisfied with the simplified version of my history that supported his preferred narrative about our relationship. He knew that I had been born in Mexico and immigrated to the United States as a child, but he had never inquired about my parents, professions, or the circumstances that had brought us to Seattle. He assumed my family lacked resources because I lived modestly and worked in accounting rather than more prestigious fields. The truth was that my father, Dr. Miguel Rodriguez, was a renowned software engineer who had founded 3 successful technology companies before retiring to focus on venture capital investments. My mother, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, held advanced degrees in mathematics and computer science and had spent 20 years developing encryption algorithms for government and corporate clients. I had inherited both their intellectual gifts and their entrepreneurial instincts, along with trust funds that had provided me with the initial capital to launch my own business ventures. Marcus had married into a family whose combined wealth exceeded $50 million, though he had met my parents only twice during our 10-year relationship, and had formed impressions of them based on their deliberately modest lifestyle rather than their actual financial status. My parents had understood immediately why I wanted to keep my marriage separate from my business activities, and they had supported my decision to live as Isabella Chen, rather than reveal the full extent of our family's success to someone who might not handle that information appropriately. Their judgment had been proven correct by Marcus's behavior throughout our marriage, and his decision to end our relationship in favor of someone who represented what he assumed was a more promising opportunity for personal advancement. As Marcus prepared to leave our apartment for the final time, carrying his possessions and his assumptions about my inability to survive without him, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief that surprised me with its intensity. The sadness was genuine grief for the end of a relationship that had provided me with companionship and affection, even though it had required me to deny fundamental aspects of my identity and achievements. The relief was equally authentic recognition that I would no longer need to diminish myself to protect someone else's fragile ego and maintain their illusions about our respective contributions to the life we had built together. Marcus paused at the bedroom door, his expression suggesting that he expected emotional pleading or dramatic gestures that would acknowledge the magnitude of his departure from my life. When I remained silent, sitting calmly on the edge of our bed with my hands folded in my lap, his confusion was visible. "Do you have anything to say?" he asked, apparently disappointed by my lack of desperation or emotional manipulation. I looked at this man who had shared my bed and my life for 10 years, while never bothering to discover who I actually was or what I had sacrificed to make our marriage possible. I considered the various responses I could offer that would either preserve his illusions about our relationship or begin the process of revealing truths that would fundamentally alter his understanding of the past decade. Finally, I smiled with genuine warmth and spoke the only words that seemed appropriate for this moment of transition from deception to authenticity. Thank you for making this decision for both of us, Marcus. You have given me the greatest gift possible tonight, and I promise you that I will never forget your generosity. His confusion deepened into concern as he processed my unexpected gratitude for his abandonment. Marcus had anticipated tears, arguments, or desperate attempts to preserve our marriage. My calm acceptance of his decision and my expression of appreciation for his choice to leave created cognitive dissonance that he could not immediately resolve. "What do you mean?" he asked, setting down his suitcase and taking a step back toward me. I stood up from the bed and walked to the window that overlooked the city lights of Seattle, the same city where I had built a technology empire while playing the role of his supportive but unremarkable wife. In the distance, I could see the Meridian Technologies building, where my actual office occupied the entire 42nd floor, and where decisions I made daily affected the lives of thousands of employees and millions of users worldwide. Tomorrow, I would return to that office as Isabella Rodriguez, rather than Isabella Chen. Tomorrow, I would stop pretending to be someone smaller and less capable than I actually was. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of reclaiming the identity I had sacrificed to protect a marriage that had never been based on genuine understanding or mutual respect. Tonight was the last night I would ever have to be anyone other than exactly who I was. "You will understand very soon," I told Marcus, still looking out at the city lights that reflected the life I would resume once our divorce was finalized. "Everything will become clear once your attorney receives the financial disclosure documents that I will be filing in response to your divorce petition." Marcus left our apartment 20 minutes later, carrying his belongings and his confidence that he was trading up from a woman who had never appreciated his value to one who would provide him with the admiration and support he deserved. He had no way of knowing that he had just made the most expensive mistake of his life, or that the woman he was abandoning possessed the power to ensure that his future would be very different from what he was imagining. As the door closed behind him, I felt 10 years of careful performance and strategic self-diminishment fall away like costumes that no longer served their purpose. For the first time in a decade, I was alone in a space where I could be completely authentic without worrying about protecting someone else's feelings or maintaining illusions that had required exhausting daily management. I walked to my laptop and opened the encrypted communications system that connected me to Meridian Technologies' executive team. My assistant had been managing my schedule and handling routine decisions during my absence, but there were strategic matters that required my direct attention and authorizations that only I could provide. The transformation from Isabella Chen back to Isabella Rodriguez would require careful coordination and precise timing to ensure that Marcus understood the full implications of his decision while protecting my company and employees from unnecessary disruption. The divorce proceedings would need to be managed by attorneys who specialized in high-net-worth cases and understood the complexities of unwinding marriages, where one party had been completely unaware of the other's actual financial status. Most importantly, I would need to determine how much of the truth Marcus deserved to learn, and how quickly that revelation should unfold to maximize both justice and personal satisfaction. The woman Marcus had dismissed as worthless and lacking in ambition was about to teach him lessons about power, consequences, and the dangers of underestimating people based on the roles they choose to play rather than their actual capabilities and resources. The next phase of this story would be far more interesting than the decade of performance that was finally ending. The silence that filled our apartment after Marcus departed was unlike anything I had experienced during our 10-year marriage. It was not the uncomfortable quiet that had characterized our recent interactions, heavy with unspoken resentments and growing emotional distance. Instead, this silence felt cleansing, like the moment after a storm passes and the air becomes clear and breathable again. I remained at the window for nearly an hour, watching the city lights flicker and shift as Seattle settled into its evening rhythm. From this vantage point, I could see the Meridian Technologies building rising 43 floors into the night sky, its distinctive blue lighting illuminating the company logo that had become synonymous with innovation in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. That building represented everything I had accomplished as Isabella Rodriguez, everything I had sacrificed to become Isabella Chen, and everything I would reclaim now that the performance was finally over. The decision to live a double life had not been made lightly or impulsively. When I first met Marcus at that coffee shop near the University of Washington 12 years ago, I was already a successful entrepreneur with significant wealth and growing influence in the technology sector. My first company, SecureNet Solutions, had been acquired by Microsoft for $200 million just 6 months before our chance encounter. I was in the process of developing the concepts that would eventually become Meridian Technologies, working with a team of brilliant engineers and computer scientists to create cybersecurity protocols that would revolutionize how organizations protected their digital assets. The technology industry had provided me with extraordinary professional opportunities and financial rewards, but it had also taught me harsh lessons about human nature and the corrupting influence of wealth on personal relationships. Every social interaction became complicated by questions about whether people were genuinely interested in me as an individual or strategically positioning themselves to benefit from my success and resources. Dating was particularly challenging because romantic interest was often indistinguishable from entrepreneurial opportunism. Marcus had represented something precious and increasingly rare in my life: authentic connection with someone who valued me for qualities that had nothing to do with my bank account or business achievements. He was completing his MBA while working part-time as a research assistant, dreaming of a career in corporate marketing and planning his future with the optimistic determination of someone who believed hard work and intelligence would be sufficient to achieve his goals. When we talked about our aspirations, he saw me as Isabella Chen, a graduate student working toward an accounting degree while supporting herself through part-time employment at an independent bookstore. That version of myself was not entirely fabricated. I had enrolled in accounting courses to better understand financial management for my growing business interests. I did work part-time at Powell's Books, though I owned the building that housed the store and several others in the same neighborhood. The life Marcus fell in love with was a simplified version of my actual circumstances, stripped of complexities that would have changed the fundamental dynamics of our relationship. Our courtship unfolded with the natural rhythm of two graduate students who shared modest budgets and simple pleasures. We studied together in coffee shops, attended free lectures and cultural events, explored hiking trails in the Cascade Mountains, and built intimacy through conversations about our hopes, fears, and dreams for the future. Marcus appreciated my intelligence and sense of humor without feeling threatened by achievements he knew nothing about. I treasured his attention and affection because it was offered freely rather than calculated to advance his own interests. The relationship felt genuine in ways that were impossible when people understood my actual financial status and professional influence. Marcus liked spending time with me because I was interesting and attractive, not because I could fund his business ventures or introduce him to powerful connections. Our emotional bond developed naturally because we enjoyed each other's company and found comfort in shared experiences and compatible personalities. When Marcus proposed marriage after 2 years of dating, I faced a decision that would define the next decade of my life and fundamentally alter both of our futures. I could maintain honesty by revealing my true identity and testing whether his feelings would survive the dramatic shift in our relationship dynamics, or I could continue the performance that had allowed us to build authentic intimacy based on who I was rather than what I owned. The choice seemed obvious at the time, though I now understand that it was based on fear rather than wisdom. I was afraid that revealing my wealth would transform Marcus from a loving partner into someone who saw me primarily as a source of financial security and social advancement. I was afraid that honesty would destroy the natural balance we had achieved and replace it with artificial dynamics based on power imbalances and economic dependencies. Most fundamentally, I was afraid that Marcus would not love the real Isabella Rodriguez as completely as he loved the fictional Isabella Chen, because the real version was more complex, more powerful, and less in need of his protection and guidance. Those fears were not entirely irrational given my previous experiences with relationships in the technology industry. Wealth changes how people interact with you, often in subtle ways that gradually erode authentic connection and replace it with strategic positioning. I had watched successful friends struggle to maintain genuine relationships as their net worth increased and their public profiles grew. The isolation that often accompanies extreme financial success was something I desperately wanted to avoid. However, my decision to build a marriage on carefully constructed lies was motivated by selfishness as much as love. Living as Isabella Chen allowed me to experience normal relationship dynamics, where I could be vulnerable, dependent, and occasionally wrong without those qualities being interpreted through the lens of my professional achievements and financial resources. Playing the role of someone who needed Marcus's support and guidance provided me with emotional experiences that were unavailable when people knew about my actual capabilities and independence. The decade that followed our marriage required extraordinary effort to maintain the illusion that supported our relationship. Meridian Technologies grew from a startup with 12 employees to a global corporation with offices in 15 countries and annual revenues exceeding $8 billion. Managing that expansion while appearing to work as a mid-level accountant for a small consulting firm required complex arrangements that consumed enormous amounts of time and energy. My official role as Chief Technology Officer provided legitimate explanation for my flexible schedule and occasional travel requirements, but concealing my actual responsibilities as founder and CEO required constant creativity and careful attention to details that could expose the truth. Board meetings were scheduled around Marcus's work schedule and disguised as routine consulting assignments. Strategic planning sessions were conducted through encrypted video conferences that I characterized as mundane client presentations. International travel for partnership negotiations and acquisition discussions were explained as professional development opportunities or family obligations. The financial arrangements were even more complex and demanding. Marcus believed we lived within his $75,000 annual salary, while occasionally receiving modest bonuses from my accounting work. In reality, our lifestyle was subsidized through a network of holding companies and trust funds that provided everything from housing to transportation to entertainment, without creating paper trails that would reveal my ownership and involvement. Our apartment was purchased through Rodriguez Holdings LLC and leased to us at dramatically below market rates. Marcus's luxury car was obtained through a corporate fleet arrangement that provided him with transportation he assumed was an exceptional lease deal. His expensive clothing, electronics, and other personal items were gifts I presented as wise investments in his professional development or fortunate discoveries at discount retailers. Maintaining these arrangements required me to become expert in deception and financial manipulation, skills that were completely contrary to my natural inclinations toward honesty and transparency. Every month brought new challenges that had to be resolved without arousing Marcus's suspicions about our actual financial situation. Every gift had to be carefully justified to maintain consistency with our supposed budget constraints. Every expense had to be managed through intermediaries who understood the importance of protecting my privacy while ensuring Marcus never felt deprived or questioned our apparent prosperity. The emotional cost of this elaborate performance was enormous and grew more burdensome with each passing year. Living authentically in my professional life while playing a role in my personal life created psychological strain that affected every aspect of my existence. I began to lose track of which thoughts and feelings belonged to Isabella Rodriguez and which ones were part of the character I portrayed for Marcus's benefit. The disparity between my public achievements and private relationships became particularly difficult to manage as Meridian Technologies gained prominence in the technology industry. I was featured on magazine covers as one of the most influential women in business. I received awards for innovation and leadership that were presented at galas, attended by hundreds of industry leaders. I gave keynote speeches at conferences, where my insights about artificial intelligence and cybersecurity shaped conversations about the future of technology. None of these professional accomplishments could be shared with the person who was supposed to be my closest companion and strongest supporter. Marcus remained completely unaware that his wife was recognized as one of the most innovative entrepreneurs of her generation, that her work was protecting the digital infrastructure of major corporations and government agencies, or that her vision was influencing policy decisions about technology regulation and international cooperation. The isolation was profound and increasingly unbearable. Success felt hollow when it could not be celebrated with the person I loved most. Achievements that should have brought joy and pride instead created additional stress about maintaining secrecy, and managing the growing complexity of my dual existence. Marcus, meanwhile, grew more comfortable with his assumptions about our respective roles and contributions to our marriage. He began treating me with the casual condescension that often characterizes relationships where one partner believes they are significantly more accomplished and valuable than the other. His comments about my lack of ambition became more frequent and cutting. His suggestions that I was holding him back from greater success became routine parts of our conversations. The irony was excruciating. Marcus was criticizing me for limitations that were entirely fictional, while being completely dependent upon achievements he knew nothing about. His lifestyle was funded by my success. His comfortable existence was made possible by my sacrifice. His ability to focus on his career without financial stress was a direct result of security I provided while remaining invisible. Yet Marcus interpreted my apparent contentment with modest circumstances as evidence of character flaws rather than strategic choices. He saw my lack of career advancement as confirmation that I lacked the drive and intelligence necessary for significant professional achievement. He viewed my willingness to handle domestic responsibilities and financial management as natural consequences of my limited capabilities rather than deliberate decisions to support his comfort and success. The cognitive dissonance became almost unbearable during our final months together. Marcus would complain about his professional challenges and express frustration about his limited advancement opportunities, while being completely unaware that his wife was successfully navigating far more complex business situations on a daily basis. He would offer condescending advice about career development and financial planning to someone whose net worth exceeded his annual salary by several orders of magnitude. Most painfully, Marcus began comparing me unfavorably to other women he encountered through his work and social activities. He praised colleagues who demonstrated ambition and professional achievement, while simultaneously criticizing me for lacking those same qualities. He expressed admiration for women who had built successful careers while remaining blind to the fact that he was married to someone whose accomplishments exceeded anything he had witnessed in his professional environment. Jennifer Morrison represented the culmination of these destructive patterns. She was young, attractive, and professionally ambitious in ways that Marcus found compelling because they validated his own aspirations and values. Jennifer looked at Marcus and saw a successful marketing manager who could provide her with mentorship, security, and advancement opportunities within their organization. What Jennifer did not understand was that Marcus's position and the company they both worked for were dependent upon contracts with Meridian Technologies that I personally negotiated and could terminate at will. Her romantic interest in Marcus was based on perceptions of his professional status and financial stability that were entirely artificial and completely dependent upon his connection to me. Marcus had fallen in love with Jennifer because she represented everything he believed he deserved: youth, beauty, ambition, and most importantly, admiration for accomplishments he assumed were entirely his own. She provided validation for his sense of superior worth and confirmation that he was capable of attracting someone he considered more valuable and promising than his current wife. The triangle that developed between Marcus, Jennifer, and me was based on misunderstandings and false assumptions that would have been comical if they had not been so personally devastating. Marcus was leaving his wife for his secretary, unaware that his wife was the secret power behind his professional success, and that his secretary was attracted to artificial advantages that would disappear along with his marriage. Jennifer was pursuing a relationship with her supervisor, unaware that his apparent success was entirely dependent upon his connection to the woman she was helping him abandon. She was destroying a marriage to access benefits that existed only as long as that marriage remained intact. I was losing my husband to a woman who had been unknowingly benefiting from my success, while helping to destroy the relationship that made that success relevant to Marcus's life and career. The whole situation was a masterpiece of irony and miscommunication that could only have resulted from the elaborate deception I had maintained for 10 years. My attempt to protect our marriage from the complications of wealth had instead created vulnerabilities that made our relationship even more fragile and ultimately unsustainable. Tonight, as I stood alone in our apartment for the first time in a decade, I finally understood that the marriage I had sacrificed so much to preserve had never actually existed. Marcus had never loved Isabella Rodriguez because he had never met her. He had fallen in love with a carefully crafted illusion that bore only superficial resemblance to who I actually was and what I had accomplished. The real tragedy was not that our marriage was ending, but that it had been built on foundations so false that authentic intimacy had been impossible from the beginning. I had given Marcus 10 years of performance instead of partnership, deception instead of trust, and artificial dependency instead of genuine collaboration. The woman he was abandoning tonight had never truly existed, except in his imagination and my daily acting. The woman he would face in divorce proceedings was someone he had never met and was completely unprepared to handle. The consequences of his decision would teach him lessons about reality that 10 years of marriage had not provided, because I had protected him from truth that would have made our relationship more honest but more challenging. As I finally turned away from the window and began preparing for the life I would reclaim tomorrow, I felt neither anger nor sadness about Marcus's departure. Instead, I experienced something that had been absent from my existence for too many years: the anticipation of living authentically without apology, limitation, or performance. The elaborate charade was finally ending, and the real Isabella Rodriguez was about to remind everyone who had forgotten exactly who they were dealing with. The morning after Marcus departed, I woke at 5:30 without an alarm for the first time in years. The absence of his presence in our bed was immediately apparent, but rather than the emptiness I had anticipated, I felt an unexpected sense of spaciousness and possibility. For the first time in a decade, I could begin my day as Isabella Rodriguez, without considering how my actions and decisions would affect the carefully constructed narrative that had defined my marriage. I dressed in clothing that reflected my authentic professional identity rather than the modest wardrobe I had maintained to support my accountant persona. The tailored charcoal suit, Italian leather shoes, and platinum jewelry that I selected from the hidden section of my closet had been purchased years ago but rarely worn because they would have raised questions about my supposed financial limitations. Today, they felt like armor that would protect me during the transformation from hidden entrepreneur to visible leader. The drive to Meridian Technologies headquarters took 45 minutes through Seattle's morning traffic, providing me with time to mentally prepare for resuming full operational control of the company I had built while living as someone else. For 10 years, I had managed my business empire through carefully orchestrated remote communications, strategic delegation, and periodic visits disguised as routine consulting assignments. My executive team had grown accustomed to my unusual availability patterns and unconventional management style without understanding the personal circumstances that necessitated such arrangements. Dr. Sarah Kim, my Chief Operating Officer, had been instrumental in maintaining organizational stability during my extended periods of limited visibility. Sarah possessed the operational expertise and leadership skills necessary to translate my strategic vision into daily execution across multiple divisions and international markets. Our partnership had evolved into one of complete professional trust, with Sarah handling routine decisions and escalating only the most significant strategic matters that required my direct involvement. James Morrison, my Chief Financial Officer, managed the complex financial structures that protected both my personal assets and the company's international operations from regulatory complications and competitive intelligence gathering. James understood better than anyone the sophisticated arrangements that had allowed me to maintain my double life while ensuring Meridian Technologies continued growing and expanding into new markets and technological domains. Dr. Isabella Chen, my Chief Technology Officer, led our research and development efforts in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity innovation. Lisa possessed the technical brilliance and research capabilities that had transformed my initial concepts into commercially viable products that were now protecting digital infrastructure for governments and corporations worldwide. Her work had established Meridian Technologies as the undisputed leader in advanced threat detection and automated security response systems. These three executives, along with our broader leadership team, had been running Meridian Technologies with extraordinary competence and dedication, while accommodating my unusual management approach and limited physical presence. They deserved to understand the personal circumstances that had shaped our unconventional organizational structure, and they needed to prepare for the operational changes that would result from my return to full-time leadership. I arrived at Meridian Technologies headquarters before most employees began their workday, using my private entrance and executive elevator to reach the 42nd floor without encountering colleagues who might have questions about my early arrival or professional attire that was more formal than my usual consulting appearances. My corner office, which had remained largely unused during my years of remote management, felt both familiar and foreign as I settled behind the mahogany desk that had been custom-built to accommodate the multiple monitors and communication systems necessary for managing a global technology corporation. The view from my office windows encompassed downtown Seattle and Elliott Bay, providing a perspective on the city that had served as the backdrop for both my professional success and personal deception. From this vantage point, I could see the neighborhood where Marcus and I had lived our fictional life, as a struggling married couple, and I could observe the broader urban landscape that had been shaped by the economic growth and technological innovation that companies like mine had brought to the Pacific Northwest. Sarah arrived at 7:15, earlier than our scheduled 8 o'clock meeting, but consistent with her habit of beginning each workday with preparation time that allowed her to address urgent matters before our daily strategic discussions. She knocked on my office door with the respectful formality that characterized all of our professional interactions, though I could see surprise in her expression at finding me already present and dressed in executive attire, rather than the business casual clothing I typically wore during my consulting visits. "Isabella, you are here unusually early today," Sarah observed as she entered my office with her tablet and the financial reports that formed the basis of our regular operational reviews. "Is there a particular matter that requires immediate attention, or should we proceed with our standard agenda?" I gestured for Sarah to take her usual seat across from my desk, noting how the familiar routine of our business meetings felt different now that I was no longer managing the psychological stress of maintaining my double identity. The relief was profound and immediately apparent, as if a constant background tension that I had learned to ignore was finally dissipating. "Sarah, before we discuss operational matters, I need to share information about changes in my personal circumstances that will significantly affect my availability and involvement in company management going forward." I began, choosing my words carefully to convey the magnitude of what I was about to reveal without creating unnecessary concern about organizational stability or strategic continuity. Sarah had known me for 8 years, having joined Meridian Technologies as a senior director of operations before being promoted to her current role as my most trusted lieutenant and operational partner. Throughout our professional relationship, she had demonstrated exceptional discretion about personal matters and had never pressed for details about the unusual scheduling constraints and communication preferences that had shaped my management approach. However, I could see curiosity in her expression as she prepared to hear an explanation for patterns that had puzzled her, despite her professional restraint in asking direct questions about my personal life and the circumstances that kept me away from the office for extended periods while remaining actively involved in all strategic decisions. "My husband and I separated last night after 10 years of marriage," I continued, watching Sarah process this information and begin to understand why my personal circumstances were relevant to our business operations. "The separation will result in divorce proceedings that may attract media attention due to the financial complexities involved in our case." Sarah nodded with the composed understanding that had made her such an effective operational partner, though I could see her calculating the potential implications for our company's public relations and the legal complications that might arise from high-profile personal litigation involving the founder and CEO of a major technology corporation. "More importantly," I continued, "the end of my marriage means that I will no longer need to maintain the privacy arrangements and scheduling limitations that have characterized my involvement in company management for the past decade. Beginning immediately, I will be resuming full-time operational control and direct leadership of all strategic initiatives." The transformation in Sarah's expression was immediate and profound. For 8 years, she had been managing around my unusual availability patterns and remote communication preferences, without understanding the personal circumstances that necessitated such arrangements. The revelation that these limitations had been related to my marriage rather than health concerns, family obligations, or other personal matters that she had privately speculated about provided context that immediately clarified years of organizational puzzles and strategic decisions that had seemed unnecessarily complex or indirect. "Isabella, may I ask whether your increased availability and direct involvement will require adjustments to the operational authority and decision-making responsibilities that you have delegated to the executive team over the years?" Sarah inquired with the careful professionalism that characterized her approach to sensitive organizational matters. The question was both appropriate and strategically important. For 10 years, Sarah, James, and Lisa had been operating with extraordinary autonomy and decision-making authority because my personal circumstances had prevented me from maintaining the direct oversight and immediate availability that most CEOs provided to their organizations. Their exceptional performance had been possible because they possessed both the competence, to handle complex responsibilities, and the judgment to escalate appropriately when situations required my direct involvement. The delegation arrangements that have served us well will continue unchanged, I assured her. My increased availability will enhance rather than replace the operational structure that has made Meridian Technologies so successful. However, there are strategic initiatives that I have been postponing because they would have required more direct involvement than my personal circumstances previously permitted. I outlined several acquisition opportunities and partnership negotiations that I had been avoiding because they would have demanded extended travel and intensive personal attention that was incompatible with maintaining my marriage to Marcus. These strategic opportunities represented hundreds of millions of dollars in potential growth and technological advancement that had been sacrificed to preserve the illusion of being Isabella Chen rather than Isabella Rodriguez. Additionally, I described public relations initiatives and industry leadership opportunities that I had declined because they would have raised my public profile in ways that could have exposed my true identity to Marcus and created complications for our relationship. Speaking engagements, media interviews, and conference presentations that could have enhanced both my personal reputation and our company's market position had been consistently avoided to protect my domestic deception. Sarah listened with increasing amazement as she began to understand the scope of opportunities and strategic initiatives that I had been delaying or avoiding to accommodate personal circumstances she had never fully understood. The realization that my unusual management approach had been constraining our company's growth and limiting our strategic options despite our remarkable success was clearly both surprising and energizing for someone with her operational expertise and growth-oriented mindset. These opportunities represent extraordinary potential for organizational expansion and market leadership, Sarah observed, her excitement about future possibilities evident despite her professional composure. Should I begin preparing operational assessments and implementation timelines for the initiatives you have described? I nodded, feeling the familiar enthusiasm for strategic planning and business development that had been muted for years by the constant psychological burden of maintaining my double identity. The prospect of pursuing ambitious growth initiatives without worrying about their impact on my personal relationships or their potential to expose my deception was liberating in ways that I had not fully anticipated. Schedule meetings with James and Lisa for later this morning, I directed. They need to understand the changes in my circumstances and the strategic implications for their respective areas of responsibility. Also, please arrange a full executive team meeting for tomorrow afternoon to begin comprehensive planning for our expanded operations and strategic initiatives. Sarah departed to coordinate these meetings and begin the preliminary research and analysis that would support our strategic planning process. Her enthusiasm was infectious and reminded me of the excitement I had felt during Meridian Technologies. Early years when every decision could potentially transform our competitive position, and every strategic initiative offered opportunities for breakthrough achievements in technological innovation and market expansion. James Morrison arrived for our 9:30 meeting with the detailed financial reports and legal documents that would be necessary for managing the complex intersection between my divorce proceedings and our corporate operations. James possessed unparalleled expertise in corporate finance and international business law, having spent 15 years structuring deals and managing legal challenges for technology companies operating across multiple jurisdictions, with varying regulatory requirements and tax obligations. Isabella, Sarah briefed me about the changes in your personal circumstances and the potential implications for our corporate structure and financial arrangements. James began as he arranged his materials on the conference table in my office. I have prepared preliminary assessments of the legal and financial considerations that may arise during your divorce proceedings. The documentation James had prepared was comprehensive and demonstrated the sophistication of the financial structures that had protected my assets and income throughout my marriage. The network of holding companies, trust funds, and international partnerships that had funded my lifestyle while concealing my wealth from Marcus had been designed with multiple layers of legal protection and privacy preservation that would make them extremely difficult for opposing counsel to penetrate or challenge effectively. The prenuptial agreement that your husband insisted upon contains standard language about full financial disclosure and penalty clauses for concealed assets. James noted as he reviewed the relevant sections of the document that Marcus had been so confident would protect his interests. However, the agreement does not define concealed assets or specify methods for asset valuation that would be binding on both parties. James explained how the prenuptial agreement's language could be interpreted in ways that would make Marcus liable for the lifestyle benefits he had received throughout our marriage, without understanding their source or true cost. The agreement assumed that both parties had been truthful about their financial circumstances during the marriage, creating potential claims for breach of contract and fraudulent inducement that could be devastating for someone in Marcus's position. Additionally, the agreement contains reciprocal penalty clauses that apply equally to both spouses. James continued with the subtle satisfaction of someone who specialized in identifying strategic advantages in complex legal documents. If your husband's attorney attempts to claim that you concealed assets, the same standard of disclosure and penalty assessment will apply to his financial arrangements and lifestyle benefits. The implications were significant and potentially catastrophic for Marcus. Every luxury he had enjoyed during our marriage, from his expensive car to his designer clothing to our comfortable lifestyle, had been funded through arrangements that he had never understood or acknowledged. If his divorce attorney chose to pursue claims about my concealed wealth, they would be opening investigations into financial arrangements that would reveal Marcus as the primary beneficiary of undisclosed assets rather than their victim. James had prepared detailed documentation of every financial benefit that Marcus had received throughout our marriage, from direct subsidies to lifestyle enhancements to professional opportunities that had been made possible through my business connections and financial resources. The total value of these benefits exceeded $2 million, representing wealth that Marcus had consumed without acknowledgement or appreciation, while simultaneously criticizing me for my supposed lack of financial contribution to our relationship. The strategic question becomes whether to pursue maximum legal advantage or seek resolution that minimizes public attention and media coverage. James observed as we reviewed the various legal approaches that were available for managing the divorce proceedings. Your husband's financial exposure creates leverage that could be used to achieve favorable settlement terms quickly and privately. The decision would depend partly on Marcus's behavior during the initial stages of our separation, and his willingness to negotiate reasonably once he understood the actual financial dynamics of our relationship. If he chose to pursue vindictive litigation or make unreasonable demands based on his misconceptions about our respective circumstances, the legal consequences could be severe and permanent. If he demonstrated wisdom and humility when confronted with reality, more charitable resolutions might be appropriate. Isabella Chen arrived for our 11 o'clock meeting with prototype demonstrations and technical specifications for innovations that had been delayed because they required my direct involvement and public visibility. Isabelle's research team had been developing breakthrough technologies in artificial intelligence and quantum computing that represented the next generation of cybersecurity and data protection systems. But commercializing these innovations would require extensive media attention and industry presentations that had been incompatible with my domestic deception. Isabella, the technical capabilities we have developed are approximately 3 years ahead of our nearest competitors, Lisa explained as she demonstrated software that could predict and prevent cyber attacks before they were launched by analyzing patterns in network traffic and communication metadata. However, bringing these technologies to market requires strategic partnerships and regulatory approvals that demand extensive personal involvement from company leadership. The innovations Lisa's team had created would revolutionize how organizations protected their digital assets and managed cybersecurity risks. The artificial intelligence algorithms could identify threats that human analysts would miss and respond to attacks faster than any existing security systems. The quantum computing applications could encrypt sensitive data in ways that would be impossible for conventional systems to decrypt, even with unlimited computational resources. These technologies represented billions of dollars in potential revenue and could establish Meridian Technologies as the undisputed global leader in advanced cybersecurity solutions. However, commercializing them would require me to become a highly visible public figure who would be recognized as one of the most innovative entrepreneurs in the technology industry. Such visibility would have made maintaining my double identity impossible and would have exposed my deception to Marcus in ways that would have destroyed our relationship immediately. The regulatory approval process alone will require congressional testimony and meetings with national security officials from multiple countries, Lisa continued, outlining the public engagement requirements that had made these innovations commercially impractical during my marriage. Additionally, The strategic partnerships necessary for global deployment will require extensive conference presentations and media interviews that would establish you as the primary spokesperson for next-generation cybersecurity innovation. The prospect of pursuing these delayed opportunities was simultaneously exciting and intimidating. For years, I had been constraining my company's growth and my personal achievement to accommodate Marcus's emotional needs and preserve his illusions about our relationship. The freedom to pursue maximum strategic advantage and industry leadership represented a fundamental transformation in how I could approach both my professional responsibilities and my personal ambitions. Begin preparing comprehensive development timelines and commercialization strategies for all delayed technologies, I instructed Lisa. Also, schedule meetings with our regulatory affairs team and public relations consultants to begin planning for the increased visibility and public engagement that these initiatives will require. Lisa departed with visible excitement about finally being able to pursue the innovations that her research team had been developing for years. Her enthusiasm reminded me of my own excitement during Meridian Technologies. Early years when breakthrough technologies and strategic opportunities represented clear paths to extraordinary success, rather than complications that needed to be managed around personal limitations. As I reflected on the morning's meetings and the strategic initiatives that were now possible, I felt profound relief about finally being able to align my personal authenticity with my professional responsibilities. For 10 years, I had been living as two different people in two different worlds, managing the psychological stress and practical complications that resulted from maintaining such elaborate deception. The end of my marriage represented not just personal loss but professional liberation that would allow me to pursue the ambitious goals and public recognition that I had been avoiding to protect someone who had never appreciated the sacrifices I was making on his behalf. Marcus had left our marriage believing he was trading up from a woman who lacked ambition and achievement to someone who would support his own aspirations for success and recognition. The irony was that his departure would allow me to resume pursuing achievements that exceeded anything he had ever imagined possible, while his relationship with Jennifer would collapse once the artificial advantages that had attracted her to him disappeared along with his connection to me. The real Isabella Rodriguez was emerging from a decade of voluntary invisibility, and the world was about to be reminded why she had been considered one of the most formidable entrepreneurs of her generation before she chose love over ambition and deception over honesty. The price of that choice had been enormous, but the lessons learned during those years of sacrifice and performance would make my return to authentic leadership even more powerful and strategic than my original success had been. 3 days after Marcus departed with his suitcases and his certainty about my limitations, I received the first communication from his attorney. The envelope arrived via certified mail at our former shared address, forwarded through the complex postal arrangements I had maintained to protect my privacy during our marriage. The law firm of Henderson Walsh & Associates had prepared a preliminary divorce petition that reflected Marcus's fundamental misunderstanding of our financial circumstances and his confidence that I would accept whatever settlement terms he chose to offer. I opened the envelope while sitting in my executive office at Meridian Technologies, surrounded by the evidence of achievements that Marcus had never suspected, and financial resources that exceeded his comprehension. The contrast between the modest settlement his attorney proposed and the reality of my actual circumstances would have been amusing if it had not been so personally insulting and strategically revealing about his intentions. The divorce petition characterized me as a dependent spouse with limited earning capacity who had contributed minimally to our marital assets, and should therefore receive only basic spousal support for a transitional period while I developed the skills necessary for financial independence. Marcus was requesting that I vacate our apartment immediately, surrender any claims to his retirement accounts and investment portfolios, and accept a lump sum payment of $25,000 in exchange for waiving all future spousal support and property rights. The document painted a picture of our marriage that was entirely fictional but strategically designed to minimize his financial obligations, while maximizing his retention of assets he believed belonged exclusively to him. His attorney had crafted arguments based on the assumption that I possessed no significant wealth, professional achievements, or legal resources that could challenge their preferred narrative about our respective contributions to the relationship. Most revealing was the timeline Marcus had proposed for finalizing our divorce. He wanted to complete all legal proceedings within 60 days, apparently motivated by his desire to marry Jennifer Morrison as quickly as possible and begin the new life he believed would be funded by resources he had accumulated independently during our marriage. The urgency suggested that Marcus was operating under pressure from Jennifer, who had presumably given him ultimatums about leaving his marriage and formalizing their relationship within a specific time frame. The haste also indicated that neither Marcus nor his attorney anticipated significant legal challenges or complex asset disputes that might delay their preferred schedule. I forwarded the divorce petition to Patricia Williams, the senior partner at Williams, Chen and Rodriguez, the law firm that had been handling my personal legal affairs for 8 years. Patricia possessed extensive experience in high-net-worth divorce cases and had been preparing for this moment since I first briefed her about my unusual marital circumstances 3 years earlier, when Marcus's behavior began suggesting that our relationship might not survive his growing dissatisfaction with my apparent limitations. Patricia called within 2 hours of receiving the documents, her voice conveying the professional satisfaction of someone who specialized in cases where opposing counsel had made fundamental errors in assessing their client's strategic position. Isabella, this petition reads like a textbook example of inadequate due diligence and overconfident legal strategy, Patricia observed as we reviewed the document's key provisions and underlying assumptions. Marcus's attorney has made claims about your financial circumstances and earning capacity that will be impossible to defend once we submit our response and supporting documentation. Patricia had been preparing for this case for years, accumulating comprehensive evidence of every financial benefit Marcus had received during our marriage, and documenting the sophisticated legal structures that had concealed my wealth while funding our lifestyle. Her preparation included detailed records of every luxury purchase, every travel expense, every professional opportunity that had been provided to Marcus through arrangements he had never understood or acknowledged. The evidence Patricia had assembled would demonstrate that Marcus had been the primary beneficiary of undisclosed marital assets rather than their victim, transforming his divorce petition from a strategic advantage into a legal liability that could result in significant financial penalties and public embarrassment. The prenuptial agreement he insisted upon contains reciprocal disclosure requirements and penalty clauses that will apply to both parties equally, Patricia continued, explaining how Marcus's overconfident legal strategy had created vulnerabilities that we could exploit to achieve favorable settlement terms or devastating litigation outcomes depending on his future behavior. Additionally, his petition requests expedited proceedings that will require immediate and comprehensive financial disclosure from both parties. He appears to believe that urgency will work in his favor, but accelerated timelines will actually prevent his attorney from conducting the thorough investigation that might reveal the complexity of our actual circumstances. Patricia recommended responding to Marcus's petition with our own comprehensive filing that would provide complete disclosure of my assets, income, and business interests while documenting his financial benefits and lifestyle subsidies throughout our marriage. This approach would satisfy all legal requirements for transparency, while simultaneously demonstrating the magnitude of his misconceptions about our respective financial positions. The response would also invoke the penalty clauses in our prenuptial agreement, seeking damages for Marcus's breach of the disclosure requirements he had been violating unknowingly throughout our marriage, by failing to acknowledge or report the value of benefits he had received through my undisclosed financial arrangements. Should we schedule a settlement conference to provide Marcus and his attorney with an opportunity to reconsider their position before we proceed with comprehensive litigation? Patricia inquired, offering Marcus a final opportunity to resolve our divorce amicably before the full scope of his legal and financial exposure became public record. The decision would depend partly on whether Marcus demonstrated any willingness to acknowledge his errors in judgment or showed genuine remorse for his treatment of me during our final months together. If he approached our divorce proceedings with humility and respect, I was prepared to be generous in ways that would protect him from the consequences of his misconceptions and allow him to begin his new relationship with Jennifer without facing financial devastation. However, if Marcus continued to demonstrate the arrogance and dismissive attitude that had characterized his departure from our marriage, the legal and financial consequences would be severe and permanent. His assumption that I lacked the resources or determination to challenge his preferred narrative would prove to be the most expensive mistake of his life. I authorized Patricia to prepare our comprehensive response while scheduling a settlement conference for the following week. This approach would provide Marcus with clear evidence of his strategic disadvantage, while offering him one final opportunity to negotiate reasonable terms, before his misconceptions about my circumstances became permanently documented in legal proceedings. that would be accessible to his employers, his family, and his new romantic partner. The following morning brought an unexpected development that would accelerate the timeline for Marcus's education about my actual identity and capabilities. Jennifer Morrison had apparently grown impatient with the pace of his separation from me, and had taken actions that would force our private marital dispute into a more public arena, with professional consequences that neither she nor Marcus had anticipated. Sarah Kim arrived at my office with intelligence gathered through our corporate security department about social media posts and professional networking activities that Jennifer had been conducting since Marcus moved in with her 3 days earlier. Jennifer had been announcing their relationship publicly and characterizing Marcus as a successful technology executive who was finally free to pursue opportunities that his previous relationship had prevented him from exploring. Most significantly, Jennifer had been reaching out to recruiters and business contacts within the Seattle technology industry, promoting Marcus as an available candidate for senior marketing positions at companies that might value his experience and professional connections. Her efforts included specific references to his marriage ending and his newfound availability for roles that might require extensive travel or relocation. The irony was profound and potentially devastating for both Marcus and Jennifer. She was marketing him to an industry where I was a recognized leader, and where Meridian Technologies was known as one of the most influential companies in the cybersecurity and artificial intelligence sectors. Jennifer's promotional efforts were bringing Marcus's personal circumstances to the attention of colleagues and competitors, who would soon learn about his connection to me and the artificial nature of the professional advantages she was advertising. Jennifer Morrison contacted 3 executive recruiters yesterday, specifically mentioning Marcus's availability for positions that would utilize his technology industry experience and business development capabilities, Sarah reported as we reviewed the intelligence our security team had gathered about their activities. She appears to be unaware that 2 of these recruiting firms have ongoing relationships with Meridian Technologies, and that the 3rd firm has been seeking our business for the past 18 months. The professional networking Jennifer was conducting on Marcus's behalf would inevitably lead to questions about his previous employment, his professional relationships, and the circumstances that had enabled him to develop expertise in technology marketing and business development. Any thorough background investigation would reveal his marriage to me and the complex relationship between his employing firm and Meridian Technologies that had shaped his career opportunities and professional success. Additionally, Jennifer's social media activities were creating a public record of their relationship timeline that would be available to opposing counsel and potentially embarrassing for Marcus if our divorce proceedings became contentious. Her posts included photographs and descriptions of their lifestyle and activities that contradicted the modest financial circumstances Marcus had reported in his divorce petition. The evidence suggested that Jennifer was unaware of the financial and professional complications that Marcus's divorce might create for both of their futures. She was proceeding with confidence that his separation from me would provide them with increased opportunities and improved circumstances, unaware that the opposite outcome was far more likely once the truth about our relationship became public. Should our corporate communications team begin preparing responses to inquiries that may arise from Jennifer's networking activities? Sarah asked, anticipating that Marcus's professional connections to Meridian Technologies would soon become topics of interest within the Seattle business community. I considered the strategic implications of various approaches to managing the public relations aspects of my divorce, while maintaining appropriate privacy about personal matters and protecting both my company's reputation and Marcus's professional standing within the industry that would determine his future employment prospects. Prepare standard responses that acknowledge my personal situation without providing details that might compromise either the legal proceedings or our business interests, I directed. Also, monitor industry communications and social media channels for any discussions about Marcus or our relationship that might require more direct intervention. The decision to maintain professional discretion while allowing natural consequences to unfold represented a balanced approach that would provide Marcus with opportunities to understand his situation and modify his behavior before more serious interventions became necessary. If he demonstrated wisdom in handling the professional complications that were developing, I was prepared to use my industry influence to protect him from career damage that might result from his poor judgment in personal matters. However, if Marcus continued to demonstrate arrogance and entitlement while allowing Jennifer to create additional complications through her misguided promotional efforts, the professional consequences would be severe and potentially permanent for both of them. James Morrison requested an emergency meeting that afternoon to discuss financial irregularities that had been discovered in Marcus's personal accounts and credit arrangements during our routine preparation for divorce proceedings. The investigation James had conducted into Marcus's financial circumstances had revealed spending patterns and lifestyle expenses that were inconsistent with his reported income, and suggested that he had been concealing assets or income sources that could affect our settlement negotiations. Isabella, the financial analysis has identified several concerning discrepancies that require immediate attention, James began as he spread documents across the conference table in my office. Marcus has been maintaining credit card accounts and investment portfolios that were not disclosed in his initial financial declarations, and the funding sources for these accounts are unclear. The investigation had revealed that Marcus had been receiving monthly deposits from sources that appeared to be related to consulting work or business partnerships that he had never mentioned during our marriage. The amounts were significant enough to suggest substantial income that he had been concealing from me while simultaneously criticizing my financial contributions to our relationship. Additionally, Marcus had been making luxury purchases and investments that exceeded what should have been possible based on his stated salary and our shared household expenses. The timing and nature of these expenditures suggested that he had been preparing for our separation for at least 6 months before his actual departure, accumulating assets and establishing financial independence while maintaining the pretense of marital commitment. The pattern suggests systematic financial deception that may constitute fraud under the terms of your prenuptial agreement, James continued, explaining how Marcus's concealed income and secret asset accumulation could be used to void the entire divorce settlement he was proposing while exposing him to significant legal and financial penalties. Furthermore, the consulting income appears to be connected to business relationships that were facilitated through his marriage to you, creating potential claims for misappropriation of marital assets and business opportunities that belong to both parties rather than exclusively to him. The evidence James had uncovered transformed our understanding of Marcus's motivations and strategic position in ways that were both personally hurtful and legally advantageous. Marcus had not been the financially dependent spouse he had pretended to be during our marriage, and his decision to leave me for Jennifer had been motivated by calculations about his financial independence, rather than purely emotional factors. Most significantly, his financial deception throughout our marriage had been far more extensive than my own concealment of wealth, creating legal vulnerabilities that could result in consequences far more severe than anything I might face for hiding my success from him. The discovery also suggested that Jennifer Morrison might have been aware of Marcus's financial circumstances and may have been encouraging his departure from our marriage based on her knowledge of his hidden assets and income, rather than purely romantic motivations. If this proved accurate, their relationship had been built on financial calculations rather than authentic emotional connection, making it even more ironic that Marcus had criticized me for supposedly lacking genuine feelings and commitment. Prepare comprehensive documentation of all irregularities and begin legal proceedings to void the prenuptial agreement based on Marcus's fraudulent financial disclosures, I instructed James. Also, investigate the business relationships that generated his consulting income to determine whether any of them involve conflicts of interest or misappropriation of opportunities that should have been shared marital assets. The evidence James had uncovered would fundamentally change the dynamics of our divorce proceedings, while providing me with legal and strategic advantages that Marcus had never anticipated. His overconfident approach to our separation had been based on assumptions about my financial vulnerability and legal naivety that were completely false, while his own financial deception had created liabilities that could destroy both his personal finances and his professional reputation. As I reviewed the mounting evidence of Marcus's misconceptions and strategic errors, I felt a mixture of sadness about the deception that had characterized our entire relationship and satisfaction about the justice that would soon be delivered through legal proceedings he had initiated, with such confidence in his superior position. Marcus had left our marriage believing he possessed all the strategic advantages, while I remained vulnerable and dependent. Within a week of his departure, the evidence was clear that exactly the opposite was true, and that his attempts to minimize my settlement while protecting his own assets had created legal exposure that could result in financial devastation and professional disgrace. The woman he had dismissed as lacking ambition and achievement was about to teach him lessons about preparation, strategic thinking, and the consequences of underestimating people based on the roles they choose to play rather than their actual capabilities and resources. The first phase of Marcus's education was about to begin, and the lessons would be both comprehensive and permanent. The settlement conference took place 7 days after Marcus received our comprehensive financial disclosure response in the downtown Seattle offices of Williams, Chen, and Rodriguez. Patricia Williams had arranged the meeting in our firm's largest conference room, with floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a commanding view of the city skyline and the Meridian Technologies building that dominated the urban landscape like a monument to achievements Marcus had never suspected. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early, accompanied by his attorney Richard Henderson, a mid-tier divorce lawyer who specialized in representing middle-class professionals in straightforward asset division cases. Henderson possessed adequate legal competence for routine marital dissolution proceedings, but he lacked the sophisticated expertise necessary for complex high-net-worth disputes involving international business interests and advanced financial structures. I observed their arrival from Patricia's corner office, studying Marcus's body language and professional presentation as he prepared for what he assumed would be a negotiation from a position of strength. He wore his most expensive suit, a charcoal gray ensemble that I had purchased for him 2 years earlier under the pretense that his company's dress code required more formal business attire. His confidence was visible in his posture and facial expressions, suggesting that he remained convinced of his strategic advantages despite receiving our preliminary response to his divorce petition. Henderson appeared less certain about their position, carrying multiple briefcases and legal documents that suggested he had been conducting intensive research since receiving our disclosure materials. His expression conveyed the professional concern of an attorney who had discovered that his case was significantly more complex than his initial client consultation had indicated. Patricia entered the conference room at exactly 2 o'clock, followed by James Morrison and our external counsel David Chen, whose specialized expertise in international business law and complex asset protection would be essential for addressing the sophisticated financial arrangements that had funded Marcus's lifestyle throughout our marriage. The legal team Patricia had assembled demonstrated the resources and professional competence that would be necessary for protecting my interests, while ensuring that Marcus understood the full implications of his strategic miscalculations. Marcus's reaction to our legal representation was immediate and revealing. His confident expression shifted to confusion as he processed the presence of multiple attorneys and financial experts whose hourly billing rates exceeded his monthly salary. Henderson's concern became more pronounced as he recognized the caliber of opposition they were facing and began to understand that his routine approach to divorce negotiations would be inadequate for the complexities involved in our case. Gentlemen, thank you for attending this settlement conference. Patricia began with the measured professionalism that had made her one of Seattle's most respected family law attorneys. We have prepared comprehensive materials that will provide you with complete understanding of the financial circumstances that affect this divorce proceeding. Patricia distributed bound volumes containing detailed documentation of my assets, income sources, business interests, and the complex network of financial arrangements that had subsidized Marcus's lifestyle while concealing my actual wealth from his awareness. The materials included corporate organizational charts, property ownership records, investment portfolios, and international business relationships that demonstrated the scope and sophistication of the empire I had built while living as his supposedly dependent wife. Henderson's expression transformed from professional concern to professional alarm as he reviewed the first sections of our disclosure materials. The documentation revealed assets and income streams that exceeded his previous experience with high-net-worth cases by several orders of magnitude, while simultaneously demonstrating the legal expertise and financial resources I could deploy to protect my interests during protracted litigation. Marcus remained focused on the documents with the intensity of someone attempting to understand information that challenged his fundamental assumptions about reality. His face cycled through expressions of disbelief, recognition, and growing comprehension as he processed evidence of the wealth and business achievements that had been concealed from him throughout our marriage. The section documenting his financial benefits during our relationship appeared to have the most profound impact on his understanding of our actual circumstances. The records showed every luxury purchase, every lifestyle subsidy, every professional opportunity that had been provided through arrangements he had never understood or acknowledged. The total value exceeded $2.3 million, representing wealth he had consumed, while criticizing me for my supposed inability to contribute meaningfully to our financial security. Mr. Chen, Patricia addressed Marcus directly, using his full name with the formality that characterized serious legal proceedings. These materials demonstrate that you have been the primary beneficiary of undisclosed marital assets throughout your marriage to Isabella Rodriguez Chen. The prenuptial agreement you insisted upon contains reciprocal disclosure requirements and penalty clauses that apply equally to both parties. Patricia explained how the agreement's language about concealed assets and fraudulent financial representations would be applied to Marcus's circumstances rather than mine. His failure to acknowledge or report the value of benefits he had received through my financial arrangements constituted a breach of the disclosure requirements he had been violating unknowingly throughout our marriage. Additionally, the investigation into his personal financial activities had revealed consulting income and investment accounts that he had concealed from me, while simultaneously accusing me of lacking financial transparency and partnership commitment. His secret asset accumulation and undisclosed business relationships constituted far more serious breaches of our marital financial obligations than any concealment of wealth I might have practiced for protective rather than deceptive purposes. Henderson requested a brief recess to consult privately with his client about the implications of our disclosure materials and the strategic repositioning that would be necessary given the dramatic shift in their understanding of our respective financial circumstances. The consultation lasted 45 minutes, during which Marcus and his attorney presumably discussed whether to continue pursuing their original aggressive settlement demands or acknowledge their fundamental miscalculations about our case. When they returned to the conference room, Henderson's demeanor had shifted from professional advocacy to damage control consultation. His primary concern appeared to be minimizing his client's legal and financial exposure rather than maximizing his recovery from our marital assets. Ms. Williams, my client was unaware of the extent of your client's business interests and would like to discuss reasonable settlement terms that acknowledge the changed circumstances of this case, Henderson began, using carefully diplomatic language that avoided admitting the magnitude of their strategic errors while seeking opportunities for face-saving resolution. Marcus remained largely silent during Henderson's initial response, though his body language suggested internal struggle between his wounded pride and his growing recognition that continued aggressive litigation would be personally and financially devastating. The man who had left our marriage with such confidence in his superior position was discovering that he had been completely dependent upon someone he had dismissed as inferior and limiting to his potential achievement. Patricia responded to Henderson's opening position with measured professionalism that offered Marcus opportunities for reasonable resolution while making clear the consequences that would follow if he chose to pursue vindictive or unrealistic demands based on his previous misconceptions about our relationship. Our client is prepared to consider generous settlement terms that would allow both parties to move forward with their lives without the complications and expense of protracted litigation, Patricia stated, presenting an initial proposal that would have provided Marcus with far more financial support than he legally deserved, given the evidence of his own financial deception and the benefits he had received throughout our marriage. The proposed settlement included spousal support payments that would enable Marcus to maintain his current lifestyle for 3 years, while he adjusted to his changed circumstances and developed independent income sources that did not depend upon his connection to me. The arrangement would also include professional transition assistance and career development resources that would help him establish himself in his chosen field without the artificial advantages he had been receiving unknowingly through my business relationships. Most importantly, the proposed settlement would seal all records related to our divorce proceedings and require both parties to maintain confidentiality about the financial details that had been revealed during our case. This provision would protect Marcus from public embarrassment about his financial dependence, while preventing his professional relationships from being damaged by revelations about the artificial nature of his career achievements. The generosity of our opening proposal was strategic, rather than purely charitable. Marcus's acceptance of reasonable settlement terms would allow both of us to avoid the public attention and media coverage that would inevitably accompany protracted litigation involving my business interests and public profile. Additionally, his cooperation would prevent me from having to pursue the maximum legal and financial penalties that his breach of our prenuptial agreement had made possible. However, the proposal also contained clear warnings about the consequences Marcus would face if he rejected our reasonable settlement offer and chose to pursue continued litigation based on his unrealistic assessment of his strategic position. The penalty clauses in our prenuptial agreement, combined with the evidence of his financial deception throughout our marriage, could result in judgments that would leave him financially devastated and professionally destroyed. Marcus requested additional time to consider our settlement proposal, which Henderson characterized as an opportunity to review the complex legal and financial implications with appropriate professional advisors who could help him make informed decisions about his future. The request was reasonable and suggested that Marcus was beginning to understand the seriousness of his situation, despite his wounded pride and emotional resistance to acknowledging his dependency upon the woman he had abandoned for someone he considered more worthy of his attention. Patricia scheduled a follow-up meeting for the following week, providing Marcus and Henderson with sufficient time to conduct their own legal and financial analysis, while maintaining momentum toward resolution that would serve everyone's long-term interests. The delay would also provide Marcus with opportunities to observe the broader consequences of his departure from our marriage, as his professional and social circumstances began reflecting the reality of his changed relationship to my business empire and industry influence. During the interim period between our initial settlement conference and the follow-up meeting, several developments occurred that would accelerate Marcus's understanding of his actual strategic position, while demonstrating to Jennifer Morrison that her calculations about their relationship had been based on fundamental misconceptions about the source of his apparent professional success and financial stability. Sarah Kim reported that Jennifer's networking activities on Marcus's behalf had generated significant interest within the Seattle technology community, but not the kind of professional opportunities she had anticipated. The executive recruiters she had contacted were asking detailed questions about Marcus's previous employment, his relationship to Meridian Technologies, and the circumstances that had enabled him to develop his expertise in technology marketing and business development. The background investigations being conducted by potential employers were revealing Marcus's marriage to me and the complex professional relationship between his consulting firm and my company that had shaped his career opportunities and industry reputation. Several prospective employers had withdrawn their interest after learning about his personal circumstances and the unclear status of his professional qualifications, independent of his connection to my business empire. Additionally, Marcus's current employer had begun receiving inquiries about his relationship to Meridian Technologies and the nature of the consulting arrangements that had generated significant revenue for their firm over the past several years. The investigation was creating professional complications that threatened his current position while simultaneously undermining his prospects for alternative employment within the industry that had provided him with his identity and financial security. Jennifer's well-intentioned promotional efforts were systematically destroying the professional advantages that had attracted her to Marcus, while exposing both of them to industry scrutiny that would make their relationship a topic of gossip and speculation, rather than admiration and envy. The irony was perfect and devastating. Jennifer had been marketing Marcus based on achievements that were entirely dependent upon his marriage to me, while simultaneously encouraging him to end that marriage in favor of a relationship with her. Her success in generating professional interest was accelerating the timeline for Marcus's professional and financial collapse, while demonstrating to potential employers that his qualifications were artificial and unsustainable. Marcus's realization that his departure from our marriage was destroying, rather than enhancing his professional prospects, would provide additional motivation for accepting our reasonable settlement terms, before the consequences of his strategic miscalculations became irreversible and permanent. The forces that had been set in motion by his overconfident departure were systematically dismantling every assumption he had made about his independence, his qualifications, and his attractiveness to alternative partners who were interested in his apparent success rather than his authentic personal qualities. The woman he had dismissed as lacking ambition and achievement was watching from a position of complete strategic control, as the natural consequences of his arrogance and entitlement played out exactly as she had predicted they would. The lessons Marcus was learning about power, dependency, and the difference between earned and subsidized success would be comprehensive, permanent, and professionally transformative. His education in the reality of their relationship was proceeding according to a timeline and methodology that he was powerless to influence or control, administered by someone whose capabilities he had never bothered to discover during 10 years of marriage that had been far more one-sided than he had ever understood. The first phase of Marcus's reckoning was complete, and the more challenging lessons were yet to come. The week between settlement conferences proved more transformative for Marcus's circumstances than the entire preceding decade of our marriage had been for mine. While I had spent 10 years gradually building financial security and professional influence that he never suspected, Marcus experienced a systematic unraveling of his artificial advantages that occurred with devastating speed and comprehensive scope. The first significant development occurred on Tuesday morning, when Marcus received a formal request from his employer, Davidson Technology Consulting, to meet with the managing partners regarding his professional relationships and potential conflicts of interest. The meeting had been prompted by inquiries from multiple executive recruiters about Marcus's qualifications and his connection to Meridian Technologies, which generated 28% of Davidson's annual revenue through consulting contracts I had personally negotiated and maintained. Jennifer Morrison accompanied Marcus to the meeting, apparently believing that her presence would demonstrate their professional partnership and her commitment to supporting his career development. Her attendance proved counterproductive, as the managing partners interpreted her involvement as evidence that Marcus was conducting personal business during work hours and allowing his romantic relationships to interfere with his professional obligations. The meeting lasted 2 hours and concluded with Marcus being placed on administrative leave pending completion of a comprehensive review of his consulting arrangements, client relationships, and potential violations of the firm's conflict of interest policies. The managing partners had discovered that Marcus's most successful business development achievements were directly related to his marriage to me, creating questions about whether his professional qualifications were sufficient for independent practice without the artificial advantages provided through his personal relationships. Additionally, the firm's investigation revealed that Marcus had been receiving consulting fees from external sources without proper disclosure to his employers, violating employment agreements and creating potential liability for the firm if clients viewed his undisclosed income as evidence of compromised professional judgment or divided loyalties. The administrative leave was accompanied by suspension of Marcus's access to client files, corporate communication systems, and business development opportunities while the firm conducted its investigation. The professional consequences extended beyond immediate income loss to include damage to his industry reputation and uncertainty about his future employment prospects within the Seattle technology consulting community. Jennifer's reaction to Marcus's professional difficulties demonstrated her fundamental misunderstanding of his circumstances and her superficial commitment to their relationship when it no longer provided the advantages she had anticipated. Rather than offering support and encouragement during his crisis, Jennifer expressed frustration about the impact his problems were having on her own professional standing and social reputation within their workplace. The conversation between Marcus and Jennifer following his suspension was overheard by several colleagues, who reported that Jennifer had accused Marcus of misrepresenting his professional qualifications and financial independence when they began their relationship. Her criticism focused on his failure to disclose the extent of his dependence upon his marriage to me, which had apparently been a significant factor in her decision to encourage his departure from our relationship. Jennifer's public criticism of Marcus within their workplace accelerated the deterioration of his professional reputation, while simultaneously revealing to their colleagues that their romantic relationship had been based on calculations about career advancement and financial advantage rather than authentic emotional connection. The revelation damaged both of their professional standings while creating additional complications for Marcus as he attempted to navigate his divorce proceedings and employment crisis simultaneously. The second major development occurred on Wednesday afternoon when Marcus discovered that his luxury automobile had been repossessed by the leasing company due to non-payment of fees that he assumed were being handled automatically through our joint financial arrangements. The vehicle had been acquired through a complex corporate fleet arrangement that provided him with transportation at dramatically reduced cost. But the underlying financial structure was dependent upon contracts that had been terminated following his departure from our marriage. Marcus had never understood the sophisticated arrangements that made his lifestyle possible, assuming that the favorable lease terms were simply evidence of his excellent credit and negotiating skills. The reality was that his transportation, like most aspects of his comfortable existence, had been subsidized through business relationships I maintained while remaining invisible to him throughout our marriage. The loss of his vehicle created immediate practical difficulties while serving as the first tangible evidence that his departure from our relationship was systematically eliminating the artificial advantages he had assumed were independently earned and permanently sustainable. The repossession occurred in the parking lot of Davidson Technology Consulting during business hours, providing his colleagues with visible confirmation that his professional and personal circumstances were deteriorating rapidly. Jennifer's response to Marcus's transportation crisis further demonstrated her commitment to their relationship was contingent upon his ability to provide the lifestyle and professional advantages she had expected when they began their affair. Rather than offering to share her vehicle or assist with his practical needs, Jennifer suggested that his inability to maintain basic financial obligations reflected poor planning and irresponsible money management that she found concerning about their future together. The third significant development occurred on Thursday morning, when Marcus received notification that his application for a premium credit card had been rejected due to changes in his credit profile and debt-to-income ratio that had occurred following his separation from me. The credit application had been part of his strategy for maintaining his lifestyle during the divorce proceedings, but the financial institutions had identified his changed circumstances and re-evaluated his creditworthiness accordingly. Marcus had never understood that his excellent credit rating and access to favorable financial arrangements were largely dependent upon the sophisticated asset protection and income diversification strategies that I had maintained throughout our marriage. The complex financial structures that concealed my wealth had also enhanced his apparent financial stability and creditworthiness in ways that disappeared immediately when his connection to my business empire was severed. The credit rejection was accompanied by notification that his existing credit arrangements were being reviewed for potential modification or termination based on his changed financial circumstances. The prospect of losing access to the credit facilities he had been using to maintain his lifestyle while building a financial foundation for his relationship with Jennifer created additional stress and uncertainty about his ability to navigate the transition from our marriage to his new life. Jennifer's reaction to Marcus's credit difficulties revealed her growing recognition that his departure from our marriage was eliminating, rather than creating opportunities for the improved lifestyle she had anticipated when she encouraged him to leave me for a relationship with her. Her criticism became more direct and personal, focusing on his apparent inability to manage his financial affairs independently, and his failure to adequately prepare for the practical consequences of divorce. The fourth development occurred on Friday afternoon when Marcus learned that Jennifer had been contacted by executive recruiters who were conducting background investigations related to her own career advancement opportunities. The conversations had included detailed questions about her relationship with Marcus, his professional qualifications, and the circumstances surrounding his current employment difficulties. The professional consequences of their highly publicized workplace romance were affecting Jennifer's reputation and advancement prospects in ways she had not anticipated when she decided to pursue a relationship with her supervisor. Her association with Marcus's professional difficulties was being viewed by potential employers as evidence of poor judgment and unprofessional behavior that raised questions about her suitability for senior positions within the technology industry. Jennifer's growing recognition that her relationship with Marcus was damaging rather than advancing her professional interests created additional tension between them while undermining the foundation of mutual advantage that had motivated their affair. The romance that had begun with Jennifer's admiration for Marcus's apparent success and professional influence was dissolving as the artificial nature of his achievements became apparent to their colleagues and potential employers. The systematic destruction of Marcus's artificial advantages proceeded with mathematical precision throughout the week, as each element of his comfortable lifestyle proved to be dependent upon arrangements that were terminating along with our marriage. The man who had left our relationship with such confidence in his independent qualifications and attractive prospects was discovering that his professional reputation, financial stability, and romantic relationship were all contingent upon connections to the woman he had abandoned for someone he considered more deserving of his attention. By Friday evening, Marcus had lost his employment, his vehicle, his credit arrangements, and the respect of the woman who had convinced him to sacrifice his marriage for a relationship that was proving to be based on misconceptions and superficial calculations rather than authentic emotional connection or genuine professional partnership. The week's developments also provided Marcus with increasing clarity about the scope and sophistication of the life he had been living without understanding or acknowledging. Each eliminated advantage and terminated benefit served as education about the extent of his dependence upon arrangements I had created and maintained while remaining invisible to him throughout our marriage. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Marcus's comfortable existence had been entirely artificial, funded by the success and generosity of the woman he had dismissed as lacking ambition and achievement. His professional accomplishments had been largely dependent upon business relationships I had developed and maintained. His financial stability had been subsidized by income and assets he knew nothing about. His attractive lifestyle had been made possible by someone whose capabilities exceeded his comprehension and whose sacrifices he had never acknowledged or appreciated. The transformation of Marcus's circumstances from artificial prosperity to genuine vulnerability occurred within 5 days, demonstrating the fragility of advantages that are borrowed rather than earned, and relationships that are based on misconceptions rather than authentic understanding and mutual respect. Jennifer Morrison's parallel recognition that her calculations about Marcus had been fundamentally wrong served as additional confirmation that relationships built on strategic considerations rather than genuine emotional connection cannot survive the revelation of truth about the actual circumstances and qualifications of the parties involved. The couple who had been so confident about their superior compatibility and promising future together were discovering that their relationship had been based on illusions that were even more elaborate and unsustainable than the marriage they had worked together to destroy. As I observed these developments from my position of complete strategic control, I felt neither satisfaction nor vindictiveness about Marcus's circumstances. The consequences he was experiencing were natural and inevitable results of his choices and assumptions, rather than punishments I had designed or orchestrated. His education about the reality of our relationship was proceeding according to principles of cause and effect that operated independently of my personal feelings about his treatment of me during our marriage. The most profound aspect of Marcus's transformation was his growing recognition that the woman he had discarded as inadequate possessed capabilities and resources that exceeded anything he had imagined possible. Each eliminated advantage served as evidence of planning and generosity that he had never suspected during 10 years of marriage to someone whose authentic identity remained completely unknown to him. Marcus was learning that genuine power operates most effectively when it remains invisible, that authentic strength often manifests through service rather than dominance, and that the most formidable opponents are frequently those who appear most vulnerable and accommodating. The lessons were comprehensive and personally transformative, administered by someone whose strategic sophistication and resource availability had never been apparent to him despite a decade of intimate daily contact and shared domestic life. The first phase of Marcus's education was nearing completion, and the more advanced curriculum that awaited him during our continued divorce proceedings would provide opportunities for even deeper understanding of the differences between earned and subsidized success, authentic and artificial relationships, and genuine and imaginary independence. The woman who had spent 10 years protecting Marcus from the truth about their relationship was finally allowing reality to teach him lessons that her generosity and deception had prevented him from learning, when such education might have strengthened, rather than destroyed their marriage. The second settlement conference convened on Monday morning in an atmosphere of professional tension that contrasted sharply with the confident expectations Marcus had brought to our initial meeting. Over the weekend, Marcus had experienced additional consequences of his deteriorating circumstances that had accelerated his understanding of his strategic disadvantage, while eliminating any remaining illusions about his independence or attractiveness to alternative partners. Jennifer Morrison had ended their relationship on Sunday evening following a conversation about their respective professional difficulties and the likelihood that Marcus would be unable to provide the lifestyle and advancement opportunities she had anticipated when she encouraged him to leave our marriage. Her departure had been swift and decisive, accompanied by pointed criticism about his failure to adequately prepare for the practical consequences of divorce and his apparent inability to manage his personal affairs without the support systems he had taken for granted throughout our marriage. The termination of his relationship with Jennifer served as final confirmation that the romantic connection had been based on misconceptions about his financial stability and professional qualifications, rather than authentic emotional attachment or genuine compatibility. Her willingness to abandon him immediately upon discovering his actual circumstances demonstrated the superficial nature of their partnership and the strategic rather than emotional foundations of their affair. Marcus arrived at our meeting accompanied by Richard Henderson and a financial advisor named Thomas Bradley, whose presence suggested that Marcus had finally begun to appreciate the complexity of his situation and the need for professional guidance in navigating negotiations with someone whose resources and capabilities exceeded his previous comprehension. The addition of Bradley to his team indicated that Marcus was approaching our settlement discussions with increased seriousness and realistic expectations about his bargaining position. Henderson's demeanor had evolved from confident advocacy to cautious damage control since our previous meeting. His primary focus appeared to be protecting his client from the most severe consequences of his strategic miscalculations, while acknowledging the fundamental shift in their negotiating position that had resulted from our comprehensive financial disclosure, and the evidence of Marcus's own deceptive practices throughout our marriage. Patricia Williams opened our session by reviewing the developments that had occurred since our initial conference, including Marcus's employment suspension, the termination of various financial arrangements that had subsidized his lifestyle, and the dissolution of his relationship with Jennifer Morrison. The review was conducted with professional objectivity rather than vindictive satisfaction, establishing a factual foundation for our continued discussions while demonstrating the natural consequences of Marcus's departure from our marriage. Mr. Chen, the circumstances that have developed over the past week provide additional context for our settlement discussions, Patricia observed, using language that acknowledged Marcus's changed situation without emphasizing the extent to which his difficulties had been predictable consequences of his strategic errors. These developments also offer opportunities for resolution that would serve everyone's long-term interests while avoiding the complications and expenses of protracted litigation. Patricia presented a revised settlement proposal that reflected Marcus's deteriorated negotiating position while maintaining the generous terms I had authorized to facilitate rapid and private resolution of our divorce proceedings. The revised offer included reduced spousal support payments that corresponded to his actual financial needs, rather than the lifestyle he had been maintaining artificially throughout our marriage, along with professional transition assistance that would help him establish independent income sources within his actual qualifications and market value. The proposal also included provisions for Marcus to retain certain personal assets and receive career development support that would enable him to rebuild his professional reputation, despite the damage that had resulted from the revelation of his artificial advantages and dependence upon arrangements he had never understood or acknowledged. Most significantly, the revised settlement maintained the confidentiality provisions that would protect Marcus from public embarrassment about his financial dependence, while preventing potential employers from learning details about his circumstances that could permanently damage his career prospects within the technology industry. Henderson reviewed the revised terms with careful attention to the legal protections and financial benefits that were being offered despite Marcus's weakened position and the evidence of his breaches of our prenuptial agreement. The settlement represented extraordinary generosity given the penalty clauses and damages that could be pursued through litigation if Marcus chose to reject our reasonable offer and continue pursuing unrealistic demands. Ms. Williams, my client appreciates the consideration that has been shown regarding his changed circumstances. Henderson responded, using diplomatic language that avoided admitting the magnitude of Marcus's strategic errors, while acknowledging the need for settlement terms that reflected reality rather than his previous misconceptions about our relationship. However, Mr. Chen has concerns about certain aspects of the proposed agreement and would like to discuss modifications that might address his specific needs and future planning requirements. The concerns Henderson raised on Marcus's behalf demonstrated his continued failure to understand the scope of his strategic disadvantage and the extent to which our generous settlement terms exceeded anything he could reasonably expect to achieve through continued litigation. Marcus was requesting additional spousal support payments, expanded asset division arrangements, and professional compensation for what he characterized as his contributions to my business success during our marriage. The requests revealed that Marcus remained fundamentally unaware of the evidence we possessed regarding his financial deception throughout our marriage and his breach of the disclosure requirements in our prenuptial agreement. His demands also demonstrated his continued inability to appreciate the artificial nature of his lifestyle and professional achievements, which had been entirely dependent upon arrangements I had created and maintained while he criticized me for my supposed limitations and lack of ambition. Patricia responded to Henderson's presentation with measured professionalism that provided Marcus with clear understanding of his actual legal position, while offering him final opportunities to accept reasonable resolution before we pursued maximum enforcement of our legal rights through comprehensive litigation. Mr. Henderson, your client's requests suggest fundamental misunderstanding of his strategic position in these proceedings, Patricia replied, maintaining diplomatic language while ensuring that Marcus understood the consequences of rejecting our settlement offer. The evidence we have presented demonstrates that Mr. Chen has been the primary beneficiary of concealed marital assets rather than their victim, creating substantial legal liabilities that exceed the generous terms we have proposed. Patricia outlined the specific penalty clauses in our prenuptial agreement that would apply to Marcus's circumstances if our case proceeded to litigation, including damages for breach of financial disclosure requirements and fraudulent misrepresentation of his contributions to our marital finances. The penalties could exceed $500,000 in direct payments to me, in addition to the legal fees and court costs that would accumulate during protracted proceedings. Additionally, Patricia explained how litigation would require comprehensive public disclosure of the financial arrangements that had subsidized Marcus's lifestyle throughout our marriage, creating permanent public records that would be accessible to current and future employers, business partners, and romantic interests who might be evaluating his qualifications and character. The settlement terms we have proposed provide your client with financial support and legal protections that far exceed his entitlements under the prenuptial agreement and applicable law, Patricia continued, emphasizing the extraordinary generosity we were offering despite Marcus's breaches of his marital obligations and his strategic disadvantage in any legal proceeding. However, our client's willingness to provide these benefits is contingent upon prompt resolution that avoids the complications and public attention that would accompany continued litigation. If Mr. Chen chooses to reject our reasonable offer, we will pursue maximum legal remedies without regard for the consequences to his reputation or future prospects. The ultimatum was delivered with professional courtesy that made clear the finality of our position while providing Marcus with complete understanding of the choices available to him. He could accept our generous settlement terms and move forward with his life, despite his strategic errors and character flaws. Or he could continue pursuing unrealistic demands that would result in financial devastation and permanent damage to his reputation within the professional community that determined his career prospects. Henderson requested additional time to consult with his client about the implications of our final offer and the consequences of rejecting settlement terms that exceeded anything Marcus could reasonably expect to achieve through litigation given the evidence of his own misconduct throughout our marriage. During the consultation break, I observed Marcus through the conference room windows as he processed the full scope of his strategic disadvantage and the reality that his departure from our marriage had eliminated every artificial advantage he had assumed were independently earned and permanently sustainable. His body language suggested internal struggle between his wounded pride and his growing recognition that continued resistance would result in consequences far more severe than the generous settlement terms we had offered. Thomas Bradley's role in their consultation appeared to focus on financial analysis that demonstrated the mathematical impossibility of Marcus achieving better terms through litigation, given the evidence of his circumstances and the legal expertise we could deploy to protect my interests. Bradley's professional assessment apparently confirmed that accepting our settlement offer represented Marcus's optimal outcome, despite his disappointment about the contrast between our terms and his previous expectations about our divorce proceedings. When our session resumed, Henderson announced that Marcus was prepared to accept our settlement terms with minor modifications that addressed specific concerns about implementation timelines and payment schedules. The modifications were reasonable and easily accommodated within the framework we had established, suggesting that Marcus had finally achieved realistic understanding of his position and was prepared to prioritize practical resolution over symbolic victories that would prove financially and professionally destructive. The agreement Marcus accepted provided him with financial support that would enable him to maintain reasonable standards of living while he rebuilt his career within his actual qualifications and market value. The professional transition assistance included career counseling, skills development resources, and networking support that would help him establish independent success, despite the damage to his reputation that had resulted from the revelation of his artificial advantages. Most importantly, the settlement included comprehensive confidentiality provisions that would protect Marcus from public embarrassment about his financial dependence, while preventing current and future employers from learning details about his circumstances that could permanently limit his career advancement within the technology industry. The generosity of the terms Marcus accepted demonstrated my commitment to enabling his successful transition to independent life, despite his treatment of me during our final months together and his fundamental misunderstanding of our relationship throughout our 10-year marriage. The settlement reflected values of mercy and practical wisdom rather than vindictive satisfaction or strategic dominance. However, the agreement also included clear enforcement provisions that would ensure Marcus understood the consequences of violating his confidentiality obligations, or attempting to misrepresent the circumstances of our divorce to future partners, employers, or business associates who might be evaluating his character and qualifications. As Marcus signed the final settlement documents, his expression suggested profound recognition of the lessons he had learned about the differences between earned and artificial success, authentic and superficial relationships, and genuine and imaginary independence. The education he had received through the natural consequences of his strategic miscalculations had been comprehensive and personally transformative. The man who had left our marriage with such confidence in his superior worth and attractive prospects had discovered that his comfortable existence had been entirely dependent upon the generosity and capabilities of the woman he had dismissed as inadequate and limiting to his potential achievement. The revelation had cost him his employment, his artificial lifestyle, his romantic relationship, and his illusions about his independent qualifications and market value. However, the settlement terms I had provided would enable Marcus to rebuild his life and career based on authentic foundations rather than borrowed advantages, creating opportunities for genuine success that would be more sustainable and personally satisfying than the artificial prosperity he had enjoyed throughout our marriage. The final lesson Marcus learned through our divorce proceedings was that genuine power operates most effectively through service rather than domination, and that authentic strength often manifests through generosity toward those who have demonstrated weakness and poor judgment, rather than vindictive pursuit of maximum advantage over defeated opponents. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.